Good morning, everybody. Welcome back again to the second day of our virtual matchmaking event on behalf of the European Smart City Marketplace. My name is Ilko Kruizinga, and I'll be your host during the various sessions of today, as I was yesterday. Today's topic will be on urban mobility and transport. And I do want to point you to the various good morning, everybody. Detailed information that is available on the B2Match website, including the possibility to meet amongst yourselves. I can see that we have currently 60 meetings planned between yourselves. And actually, we do have 25 people who are interested to present a project concept to our investor network. And we're currently reviewing the maturity levels of those proposals to make sure that the investors can spend their time wisely on the information provided to them. Without further ado, I want to hand over now to Georg Houben of DG Energy and Luana Bidasca of DG Move, two directors of the European Commission, setting the scene for the topic of today. If you have any question to the panel, we can cater for that using the Slido facility. There's a link just below the video window on this page to Slido. If you have any other type of problem, you can meet us in a specific meeting area that we have set up for you. Link is to be found below as well. It is a Microsoft Teams environment where many of my colleagues are available to you to answer any question you might have. Now, without further ado, I want to hand over to Georg and Luana to set the scene for today's topic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ilko, and welcome everybody again to this online matchmaking event, second day on transport, urban transport and mobility. I'm here with my colleague Luana Bidasca, who is also giving you a bit more insight into the transport and mobility context we're in. So why do we care about cities? Why do we do that? And why do we do that in this specific situation at this time? Well, many of the aspects didn't change over time. They are always the same. First thing is that the biggest part of the EU's population lives in cities. Again, one big part of that is small and medium-sized cities. Secondly, cities are the generators of the biggest share of the EU's GDP. Thirdly, they deliver on all kinds of things, just for that reason, on jobs growth, but also resilience, investments, innovation, CO2 reduction, and so on. We could most likely continue that list for quite a while. And last but not least, and most importantly, cities are at the forefront of COVID-19 and have to cope with it, if you want, at the front line. So we think that's quite important. Now, what is generally happening on EU level to support cities? Well, first of all, there's the European Green Deal you might have heard of already, with a massive renovation wave and quite some actions on cleaner transport and logistics. And later on, my colleague Luana will tell you a bit more about that in detail. Then we have the Next Generation EU proposal, which is currently suggested with a suggested budget of 750 billion euro targeted at COVID-19 recovery, and most importantly, reconfirming that the European Green Deal is in fact the EU's recovery strategy. Last but not least, we have the Next Framework Program, which is just around the corner of Horizon Europe, with again a number of measures in support of cities. There is the mission on climate neutral and smart cities, for example, or continued support to all kinds of projects, platforms, and so on to support cities. So again, cities are cemented as a very important part of European policies. Yes, and with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague Luana, who now gives us a bit more detail on the European Green Deal's urban mobility focus. Thank you, Luana.
Thank you, Georg, and good morning, everybody, from my side as well. So we cannot talk about the European Green Deal without mentioning what are its provisions for transport, and in particular for urban mobility. It has set ambitious targets for all sectors of European policy, and also including transport. So the ambition is to reduce transport emissions by 90% by 2050 to achieve carbon neutrality. And we want to achieve a drastically less polluting transport, especially in cities. The measures should be addressing emissions coming from car traffic, congestion, but also with a focus on improved public transport. It's also about the socially just transition. It's also about providing affordable solutions to cope with carbon pricing policies, for example, through public transport. Last but not least, the Green Deal would make a big push towards alternative fuels, towards cleaner vehicles. So we have a target for 1 million public recharging and refueling stations by 2025. And of course, to have 13 million zero and low emission vehicles expected on European roads.
Well, thank you, Luana. And I guess since this is the Mobility Day, Mobility and Transport Day today, we will, of course, also from Marketplace and try to support these ambitious goals and continue to bring mobility and transport, urban mobility and transport projects into the cities. Now, this leading us to the actual core purpose of this event, which is matchmaking. Now, what is matchmaking in the definition of the Marketplace? It's actually 3 very simple steps: explore, shape, deal. So see and learn what's next, shape your project should you have something interesting, and bring it into action plans, into feasible, tangible, concrete action plans, and finally find a deal to finance and deploy and implement that. That's actually a simple process which is aiming at bringing more projects to the market with private financing. So in a nutshell, mobilize the market with tested solutions. That's what we want to do. And we want to do that with you together today. And that's pretty much it from us. On behalf of my colleague Luana, and also from me, much success and lots of insights today. Enjoy your stay, stay connected, try to make new connections, get your heads around new solutions, and as said, much success with that. And with this, I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you very much. And before I forget, with this, I would also like to hand over to Mr. Lutz Heuser, who is going to moderate the panel, which is starting in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Georg, for the introduction. Very warm welcome from my side. My name is Lutz Heuser. I'm your moderator of today. In one of my responsibilities, I'm the so-called Action Cluster leader of the Action Cluster Sustainable Urban Mobility within the European Innovation Partnership for Smart Cities and Communities. I have the honor since very early days to support and join the initiative, and we had a number of activities in the past that we were talking through. Today in the panel, I have with me a great group of people that have a lot to share in the remaining 45 minutes of this first event of today. We will see Luana Bidasca again. She will share with us insights about what DG Move is envisioning and how we can see support from the European Commission in getting your projects going. We'll have Shiva Dustdar from the European Investment Bank with us. Shiva is head of division there, and she will give us insights on how the EIB could be a potential candidate for financing and advising you with your projects. And then we have two colleagues who will share concrete projects with us. Francisco José López from the city of Madrid will share with us what he has done with his team with respect to a CIVITAS project called ECCENTRIC. And Anna Gretchen from the Transport for Greater Manchester will share with us the activities that they have undertaken also in the larger context of CIVITAS. For those of you who are not familiar with CIVITAS, this is an important initiative that is already ongoing for many, many years in DG Move with respect to cleaner transport. And there is a strong alignment between the EIP-SCC and CIVITAS. Would like to go to the next slide, please. Hannah, could you? Thank you. Before I hand over to our dear colleagues from the panel, let me just briefly share with you for a few minutes what the Action Cluster Sustainable Urban Mobility is all about. We have actually 4 lead initiatives within this Action Cluster. They've been listed here, and you will find them on the website if you're going there. Later today, you have the chance to get more insights in 2 of them, namely new mobility services and intelligent mobility for energy transformation, which will happen pretty much right after this session here. We also have urban air mobility, a pretty new but very, very successful initiative on how airborne mobility can be integrated into the existing mobility means. And one of the probably longest lasting lead initiatives that we have is e-vehicles for smart cities and communities, which nowadays are, especially through the different programs on commission level, but as well on member states level, are becoming quite substantially visible. What are the key activities that the Action Cluster is going after? One of it is exactly to support these kind of events we're in today, which is market take-up of sustainable urban mobility solutions. We're happy to help fostering that and exchanging this with those cities that have a need. Therefore, we are promoting replicable solutions so that other cities can benefit from lessons learned and could identify these solutions and creating opportunities for them within their own environment. And last but not least, and this is about today as well, is knowledge sharing across the whole EIP-SCC community and other networks such as CIVITAS and the lighthouse projects of the SCC, or want to name them. As you know, today is part of a journey of 3 days where our other colleagues from energy and built environment, as well as from integrated infrastructures, are also presenting their work. So I hope that helps you to understand the stage in which we're in. But now let's move on and have our first panelist, Luana, giving us some insights about what is DG Move or the overall European Commission offering in this context. Luana, I would like to hand over to you for giving us your first insights, and please move to the next slide.
Thank you very much, Lutz. I hope you can all hear me.
Perfect.
So since 2013, the European Commission has set a view for urban mobility. And at the cornerstone of this urban mobility policy, we had the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan concepts. The European Commission recommends to all cities and towns of all sizes from the EU, but not only, to adopt an SUMP because it would help them to achieve a more livable city. It would help them to target and address specific issues related to congestion, air quality, but also work across sectors and bring together stakeholders to implement this plan. Last but not least, the SUMP has a special dedicated platform on the ELTIS website, where since the COVID-19 pandemic started, we started gathering good practice and information from cities all across. What we have also noticed is that cities which already had a plan and had a vision could accelerate some of the measures that were set already in this SUMP. During the summer, we will also issue a new SUMP guidance document that brings together all of this very recent information and practice from cities across. Also, another important piece of the puzzle is CIVITAS, of course. Since 2002, more particularly, CIVITAS has been working with 80 Living Lab cities in European funded projects through Horizon funding, totaling amount being 250 million euros. And the main positive benefit of CIVITAS has been not only that you could test, replicate, experiment with innovation measures regarding adoption of clean fleets, but also redesign of your streets. It has been also capacity building. And by capacity building, I don't mean training, I mean cities working together with academia, working with experts, working also inside their own authorities and getting to know a bit better the processes that have to be put in place in order to achieve innovation. So we have a very good website there. I could also say a few words about, just to plug in our final point, the Urban Mobility Days. This is a conference bringing together the CIVITAS and the SUMP communities at the end of September. It was supposed to be a physical conference taking place in Brussels for the first time. It will be an annual event. This year it will take place online, and I think it's positive because people from all over the world can participate and we can do it in a safe way as well. I will stop here, Lutz. I would also like to hand over to the other panelists, and I look forward for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Luana. We will certainly come back to those topics that you have raised. I'd like to introduce now as a next panelist, Shiva. She works for the European Investment Bank, which is very supportive and much known to the EIP-SCC community, as you're supporting us already for many, many years, being part of our events. Looking forward, Shiva, to give us insights about what kind of support can the audience expect from the EIB following Georg's statement that today is the day of matchmaking, where projects are trying to identify opportunities to finance and invest into these new sustainable mobility solutions that we are talking about. So Shiva, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Lutz, and I hope the connection, everybody hears me. I'm delighted to join you all, and indeed the EIB is going to be hopefully your reliable partner in financing your projects. But what we also do is provide technical and financial advice, and the area that I'm representing within the EIB is the Innovation Finance Advisory. As you know, as part of our climate commitment of the bank, we have really worked quite hard with the European Commission to integrate our advisory and financing activities and really be tailor them to actually the needs of cities, to urban mobility. So what we have across the various sort of value chain activities of cities, we're helping them to move from a linear, non-sustainable model to a more circular, sustainable, regenerative model, bringing in both the green and the digital dimension. And as part of that, the area that I'm responsible for is therefore looking at also the technology developments, the business model innovations that are required. So what I would just maybe also like to say in my introduction is that we have already a study that was done jointly with the European Commission, with RTD and DG Move, on sort of the on the financing of innovative and sustainable mobility. You see it on the slide. That study is available on our website. We have currently a pilot initiative going on, building on this, where we are sort of testing some of these ideas together with the support of Roland Berger. And here we have, in that process, had several stakeholder meetings, both with innovative companies as well as with cities and municipalities and the public sort of sector. We believe that through these sort of interactions, we gain a better understanding of what actually the needs are, where the big opportunities are, and ensure that our various products, both on the advisory and also on the financing, are fit for purpose. So I'm happy to give you a bit more of a flavor of the activities later on in the discussion. For now, I would certainly welcome any questions about the financing, and in any case, please do reach out to the EIB. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiva. And we'll certainly come back to these topics throughout the panel discussion. For those in the audience that have started to post questions, we received them. We will take them after the introduction, so stay tuned with us. We certainly will try to follow up with your questions, and please keep going to post further questions if you have to. So next two speakers will give us now insight in the stakeholders. We will talk about what is actually going on within the projects, especially in the larger context of CIVITAS that Luana mentioned before. And we're very happy to have Francisco with us, who will talk about ECCENTRIC, an initiative led by Madrid. So Francisco, the floor is yours. Please share with us what are you doing, what have you achieved, and how do you see the issue of matchmaking being reflected in your own activities? We're looking forward to your contributions.
Well, thanks very much, and it is a pleasure for me on behalf of the 5 cities making part of the ECCENTRIC project to make part of this event. It is also very difficult to explain ECCENTRIC in such a short time span. 50 measures, 5 living labs, meaning parts of the cities, of the participant cities where measures are being implemented, and more than 3 years of work now at a finishing stage. But anyway, we are dealing, as I said, with 50 measures concerning clean vehicles, new regulations on service on smart and sustainable mobility, and consolidation solutions. And we are talking about experiences already implemented, such as e-mobility stations, e-vehicle charging infrastructures, electric cargo, an electric cargo truck that has been designed during the project, consolidation centers for sustainable delivery, the use of sea transport, which is something that is being done by Stockholm, for example, instead of the moving the construction disposal using heavy cargo trucks, the improving signaling and mobility for personal mobility, such as walking, or sustainable mobility, such as walking or cycling, etc. So there are a whole lot of measures that have already been implemented, and it will be a pleasure to discuss any of them with any of the interested parties or actors that may want to look at how we have done that, including the possibility to contact the cities that have been actually implemented this measure. We have done this with a close partnership with the private sector, So we have, as I said, 28 partners, and most of them coming from the private sector, which have participated in the implementation of the measures. And finally, I would like to briefly speak about the reconsideration that we are doing now of the project results in the framework of the COVID-19 crisis. We believe that the project results remain extremely relevant. Some of them are much more relevant now that even that they went when we began the project. So we are preparing as well a specific deliverable on COVID-19 and sustainable mobility based on our experience during this years. So that would be all for the moment, and I hand over the floor again to the moderator and remain at your disposal for questions or discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Francisco. We certainly will come back and try to understand even more about the impact that these living labs have generated. So we certainly will have the chance to dive deeper into the project and the impact it's being generating. Before we start with our questions, I'd like to include finally our final panelist, Anna. She works, as I said, for Transport for Greater Manchester, is in charge of the innovation strategy there, and she will give us some insights about the activities going on in Manchester. So Anna, please go ahead and give us your insights.
Thank you very much, Lutz, and hi everyone. Good morning. I completely forgot how much earlier it is here than it is for you all, so apologies. I'm fresh from my morning run. So I work for Transport for Greater Manchester in the innovation team, and I think for the UK it's quite a special thing to have an innovation team within a transport authority, and our main role is to advise Transport for Greater Manchester on how to embed new innovations and test pilots and drive new agendas such as mobility as a service, connected and autonomous vehicles, data and AI, video analytics, and so on. So we look after all aspects of innovation. There's a lot of things that to us might be innovation that to other cities are business as usual. So that's why we're very keen on collaborating with as many cities as possible and exchanging knowledge and of course sharing best practice. And we do that already through a very large program of funded projects. We have 16 funded projects at the moment, just coming through the innovation team, and most of them are EU funded through Horizon 2020, and we also have some UK funded from the Department for Transport and Innovate UK. Specifically today, I will be referring to our two CIVITAS projects. We have Sum Plus and Handshake. Very lovely acronyms, of course. It wouldn't be an EU project without the really nice acronym. Not as good as my CAV project on Levitate, which always gets a lot of giggles in the room. So Sum Plus is looking at pathways and links of implementation for sustainable urban mobility plans. And that's been probably the key to success so far that we haven't been able to reach due to having to follow specific agendas and the lack of resources. And now with COVID-19 in sight, we have actually been able to work a lot more on the projects due to not having any choice but to work more collaboratively across sectors, as we all have very limited resources. So the best way forward and to success, it's been to engage very closely with the health sector in particular. And they were our target sector for this project specifically, to bring together all our powers, identify any gaps in our strategies, and put together a strategy for health and transport working together towards decarbonisation. We have very ambitious goals in Greater Manchester. We want to be carbon neutral by 2038 and have a 50-50 right mix of modes. This means 50% car share and 50% sustainable modes. Currently, car share is a lot higher than you'd expect, depending on the district you're within. So we have 10 districts that make up Greater Manchester, and some are as high as 75 or 80, whereas some are lower, depending how close they are to the city centre. So we have very big targets, and we need all the support that we can get from all the other sectors, and of course our European partners to meet these. I think that's it from me. And yeah, if you have any questions, or if you have any more personal questions about these projects and the innovation team at TFGM, I've put it in my personal email address and also the innovation email address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. We certainly will have a chance to dive into that. So that was the introduction of our panelists, and we would like to start now our Q&A. Before we look into the specific questions submitted via Slido, I'd like to first come back to Shiva and ask her, how could the cities expect more dedicated support? Could you be a bit more specific on examples on how cities could reach out? If someone is here in the audience saying, hey, Shiva, I have the right project, what can I do to get the support from EIB? What could be your potential answer to that?
Thank you very much, Lutz. Great question. And indeed, I would say if you are, depends now whether you are sort of the city or a particular company, but there are obviously a number of various ways we can give you support. So a first starting point can be, in fact, the advisory hub. The European Investment Advisory Hub, EIA.org, where we have a great program called URBIS, and URBIS will provide you with sort of technical and financial advisory support to kind of help you identify the potential right tool, the financing tool that you can benefit from, but also prepare you in order to have better access to those tools. So that is certainly I would say, an interesting entry point for that support. You may, and those of you who have perhaps had already projects, you may know the ELENA program, which is also quite useful, and URBIS in a way just sort of is the entry point. So through URBIS you can also benefit in the future then from ELENA, if that is sort of your if that is the fit. ELENA effectively provides you with grants that then finance all types of feasibility studies and work in order to prepare for a potential larger sort of scale of an initiative. And finally, what I would say is if you have a specific project, and in fact I'm happy to bring a slide to that is on the right now on the screen, and I hope you will see that we have of course a number of financing tools along the whole value chain, and then also along the risk appetite chain. And the ones that are listed here are primarily for smart mobility and urban projects. Below you see a number of examples. They range from companies that are more in the software space like Bolt, and we have a number of those software players right now in our advisory portfolio preparing for potential financing through some of those impact finance envelopes. We have technology developers such as Rimac who produce sort of the components for e-mobility cars. But we have also, more standard products to finance, for instance, a new bus fleet in Warsaw, when cities are trying to basically, use their use the opportunities to actually bring in cleaner solutions. Now, in these cases, if a project is not necessarily immediately ready for a financing, this is where the advising can be actually quite useful and valuable. So I would say, Lutz, to your question, I think if in doubt, if you don't have necessarily a direct counterpart yet at the EIB on the banking side, and you would like to explore, then advisory will be your right entry point, and we will of course then ensure that you are directed to the relevant service.
Thank you, Shiva, for these insights. I hope that this was sufficient for the matchmaking event thereafter, where people then can certainly follow on this. I'd like to have Luana joining me. Luana, the SMUP is a very important element in getting towards bankable solutions because it sets the larger context. Could you elaborate a bit on what's the expectation from DG Move when it gets to the SMUP? We heard from Anna and Francisco that they are following the SMUP recommendation to put this up as an important element. I think it's important to share with the audience, what do you think is necessary in order to have successful implementation of these kind of mobility projects we're talking about? Just open your mic, please, Luana. Thank you.
Here it is.
Okay.
Yes, indeed, the SUMP seems to be the basis of all the CIVITAS projects that we have been financing through Horizon and through FP7. Sometimes cities also apply in projects that help them renew their SUMP or their vision. And I think what's really important is to use this tool in a way that helps you identify the most cost-efficient measures, the measures that bring the most benefit, and also to help you prioritize where to invest and how to allocate the limited funding that you would have available as a city prior COVID-19, for example. During this economic crisis, liquidities will probably be less. So cities will be expected to do more with less. So investing in the right measures will be very important. So the SUMP can serve as a tool for that.
Thank you. Sorry. No, there was a question that I'd like to add to this, Laura, because it seems like it would address presumably the Commission. The question was, is how does the EU going to achieve 13 million low/zero emission vehicles on roads? Will there be any intervention regarding private vehicles? Was a question in Slido, which you can probably comment on, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are various ways that we can achieve this tremendous number. Well, first of all, cities are playing an important role here because they themselves adopt low emission zones, for example, which restrict the use of certain fuels and certain cars. So in time, this will bring new, cleaner cars on the roads. And then secondly, through projects, cities can use their purchasing power by procuring cleaner vehicles, and so increase the fleet of clean vehicles. And then from a regulatory point of view, the European Commission is reviewing the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Directive at the moment. So my colleagues in the unit are working on that. So we expect to have a new legislation out next year. And then in the wider framework, I know that the CO2 emission standards for cars and vans will be reviewed again.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to Francisco and Anna. There's a question in Slido. You have already somewhat responded to that, but I'd like to take the question again and asking you, do the experts expect an increase in use of personal transport in your particular region at the expense of public transport due to COVID-19, and what are the consequences thereof? So Francisco and Anna, could you please comment if you see that, and what do you think, how do you respond to that?
Yes, thanks. Also a very important question these days. Yes, we do expect, but not only expect, but we have already seen an increase in the use of personal mobility during these days. That may be good and bad. May be good as far as it is promoting sustainable modes of transport, walking, biking, electric scooters, and so on. It is bad as far as it is going to promote as well an increase in the use of car, or at least in the percentage of car in the modal use. So we're gonna have all kinds of consequences, and we need to deal with these consequences from the city governments. There will be, in our view, there will be demand changes. We have heard a lot about flattening the curve of the COVID-19 virus spread. We need to flatten the curve of the peak hours in public transport, because we don't have the capacity in the present conditions. We don't have the capacity to move as many people as we used to before this crisis. We need to deal with this increased car use that I talked about, and we need to make sure that micromobility is spread in our cities in a sustainable way. In the post-COVID-19 world, we can also make use of the possibility of use our resources that are very scarce in the cities, and that now is more available than ever for sustainable transport, which is public space. We used to be very we used to have to work very hard to get public space for sustainable mobility users, and now there's a possibility within these times of changes, as many cities are doing, including Madrid, to get back some of these spaces for the use of sustainable transport. We're going to need for regulatory changes. We're going to make sure that the positive environmental impacts that we have had during these days, for example, air quality or noise reduction, are preserved as best we can. And finally, we have to make sure that all these investment opportunities in sustainable mobility that comes with these initiatives of the European Union, the European Commission, the national governments are going to invest very heavily in many areas during the next months and years, are used for the purposes of a more sustainable mobility. Thanks.
Thank you, Francisco, from your insights from Madrid. Anna, how is it in Manchester? Do you also experience that change? And what is your response to that as the innovation officer of this?
I'll pick up first on Francisco's point that he made last about investment. And I just want to say, I feel like I've not been going to the gym for 3 months, but I think I'm getting like really big muscles in my forearms from bidding constantly on European funding, because it seems to be raining with funds at the moment. And obviously there's a lot of interest in going for those, especially for the response to COVID-19 action. So we've successfully won some new projects, which has been great, as that's really pushing forward the innovation agenda. And we're now hopefully waiting back from another fund that's more on walking and cycling, because for us, yes, of course, as most other cities, we have seen public transport being affected the most. And that's not surprising, because the UK government has advised against it unless it's necessary to use. And during lockdown, the demand has reached as low as 5% of usual peak demand. So that's very, very low. And rail and tram have been affected the most. For us, particularly as TFGM, tram is bad because we own it and operate it. So obviously that's affected us hugely. Whilst bus doesn't seem to be as low, but it's still 10% of its usual levels. So that's pretty bad. And the difference in, I want to say, sort of peaks for travel time on roads and the demand we're seeing on the roads, it seems to be very closely related to the socio-demographics of the area. And I think that's something that we will definitely look into further, because it's not something that we were particularly paying that much, attention to very closely. But we have definitely seen a huge difference in, the way people travel from different areas, and that of course indicates whether they have the capability or not to work from home. I think as a city, we are also looking for a lot of sort of answers. So for us, we're trying to understand what are the most effective social distancing interventions for public transport, and how can we manage these, and what's the best way to communicate with customers to maintain the safety, but also provide them with alternatives, because I think at the moment it would be very inward looking to just say walk and cycle, don't take the car, because if you look at the 2.8 million people that live in Greater Manchester and the really narrow pavements and cycleways, that's impossible. That would be like asking everyone to use the car when the roads are very narrow. So it's not feasible. So we're focusing a lot more on reallocation of road space as well. And the government, the UK government, has released a lot of emergency funding for cycling. So obviously, whilst we've been trying to actively work as much as possible within the international space, we're quite keen to get hold of this emergency funding, as it's fast forwarding our 10-year plan of 1.5 billion investment in improving cycling infrastructure. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anna. That's great insight. And cycling certainly seems to be all over an important modality that now has raised much more attention than ever before. So good to share that. There's another question I'd like to put to Luana and Shiva, which is about hydro energy. So the question first probably to Luana, because that's more specifically probably to be answered by you. And then I like Shiva to comment, because I know you're dealing with this topic very intensively on what kind of bankability or projects can be considered being bankable in that context. So the question is, Luana, in what way is hydrogen considered as part of the energy mix for sustainable urban transport? That was a question from Slido.
Yes, hydrogen is considered in the energy mix, of course, the right fuel for the right use. So in this sense, maybe there is interest in the audience to know about the Green Deal call topic that will be available soon under research and innovation. You can find online all the call topics under this. There are some topics regarding integrated solutions for smart cities and communities, but also green airports and green ports. So I think, yes, hydrogen will play a big role also in this. There is also work ongoing on the next horizon partnerships, and one of them will be called 2.0. So there will be a lot of investment into zero emission fuels. So of course, hydrogen will be part of this.
Thank you, Luana. Shiva, could you comment on what the EIB is considering in that context, please? I can't hear you.
Indeed, as some of you may know, last year we actually updated energy lending policy. Does anybody? I am on.
Yeah, there was a delay.
You hear me?
Just keep going. Yeah, it's just a delay.
Yeah, I hear some nods. Okay, apologies. So we last year we updated our energy lending policy, and hydrogen was actually very explicitly included as one of the important also transitional and important new energy solutions. Now, transitional in the sense that, of course, most of the current hydrogen is coming from fossil fuel sources. So indeed, it is sort of the gray hydrogen, and where the bank, and this is also certainly the area where my team's very actively involved, is the source of hydrogen. So here I'm looking at this particular topic of the role of hydrogen as part of the Green Deal. And in that particular mandate, we are also looking for who are the other investors that are interested in supporting such technology solutions and projects by mapping them, identifying them, and bringing them into as investors along with the EIP. So maybe one project that is perhaps interesting is on the refueling stations. We are working with H2 Mobility in Germany to look at the financing of the rollout of a really more massive rollout of hydrogen refill stations all across Germany. This is where classically the chick egg comes, assets that maybe for a while be potentially underutilized because you need to have the cars and the vehicles on the road to actually use the refill station. So this chicken egg, but of course nobody will buy cars unless you have the refill stations, readily available. So this is the sort of risk that we have now tools such as the Energy Demo Project and other financing tools that I mentioned earlier in my on my slide that can actually help break that chicken egg. And hence we look forward to more such projects. As I mentioned, we have on the hydrogen front, we also help cities to refleet their buses and so on. And then finally, what I would also add is the people to industrial solutions. So it may be not directly related to the cities, but of course cities very often host these industrial companies, and to the extent that they can benefit from financing to use electrolyzers and sort of make these additional investments to decarbonize using hydrogen, that is something the EIB can also support.
Thank you, Shiva. So we have about 5 minutes left. I think we can go for probably 1 or 2 more questions if you can keep your answers short, and then I'm happy to close up here. So that the audience can follow the remaining part of today's program. There's a question that I'd like to pose to Francisco. There was a question related to the citizens who want to start a car sharing scheme among themselves in their neighborhood. Is this part of the Living Lab concepts you were referring to in any of these 5 cities? Have anyone experienced that? And I like to add to that question the question of now that the project is kind of getting to its close, if I understand that correctly, will these living labs then scale up within the cities across the different neighborhoods accordingly? Could you please comment on this, Francisco?
Sure. Yes, car sharing has been one of the focus of the project, and we have some experiences on this. We have quite a big experience in Madrid for private services, but we have also during the project in Turku, in Finland, the Finnish partner has performed a test on this, and we have this experience within the project. And as the upscale of the project results, this is a very pertinent question, because now is particularly the moment in which we are working very hard to upscale the project results, not only in our 5 cities, where of course we are doing so, as the question was, but also in other cities that may be interested in learning from our Living Labs experience. So this is the situation right now.
Thank you, Francisco. Anna, there's one question. We probably don't have time to elaborate lengthily, but any relevance of autonomous transport in Manchester, given all these projects and innovations you're taking on? What's the role of autonomous mobility? Is there any?
Okay, that's fine. I'll keep it short. I think the end goal will always be fully connected and autonomous to become more efficient and meet our 50-50 mix. So of course, not competing directly with active modes or mass transit, as we see cabs in Greater Manchester to complement these systems. But for now, what I've been working on in the last 6 months or so is taking the learning from what we know so far. So, for example, we have developed a CAV strategy with principles, and they are all encompassing. And we've engaged with citizens, we've engaged with disability groups to understand how these fit in the city landscape and if this is suitable for them. So what we're doing now is pushing forward with more tangible outputs from these technologies. So for example, I'm now leading on a project that's using video analytics that was actually built for CAVs, and we're using it at our multimodal interchanges to measure the impact of social distancing and adherence to this. So basically taking something that's been designed for CAVs by a company called Humanizing Autonomy and adding it to an existing asset. And we're doing this similarly for things such as connected infrastructure and collaborative ITS. So taking everything that we've learned so far through all our trials and making sure that it's being materialized and used going forward, because of course there's always that big gap between strategy and like where we are now, the really big gray space no one seems to be infilling at the moment. So we're just trying to work as much as possible with local companies and UK SMEs to actually fill in that gap. So the next step for us is to take all these sort of, I want to call them like COVID-19 action projects, and turn them into a strategy to start filling in that grey space to meet our CAV strategy overall.
Okay, I'd like to start with you with the final round. 30 seconds. What is the key takeaway that the audience should take away from the Greater Manchester area and your activities there from the transport perspective?
I think we've been learning more throughout COVID-19 exactly what our gaps are in knowledge and why we need to continue working collaboratively with other cities and other companies, because we can't be experts in everything. So it's good to understand exactly where we can partner up and exactly with what company. So I think during the last 3 months, we've definitely been a lot more sort of open-armed to working with like anyone that comes to talk to us, as long as we can explain to them, here are our challenges and how can you help us meet these with a solution, and also being involved in more sort of rapid wins, let's say, or well, projects that might work or not.
No. All right, Francisco, your 30-second statement. What do we take away from Madrid for today?
A very simple message. We are finishing ECCENTRIC. All measures are mostly implemented, so we are replicating them and upscaling them. So we invite all the audience to contact us should they be interested in work with us, with any other 5 cities or other cities in implementing these measures.
Okay, thank you very much. Shiva, the 30 seconds takeaway from EIB.
Well, if you would like to have money and advice how to get the money, then please do reach us. Also reach out to us. You can do so either through innofinadvisory@eib.org or through the EIB advisory hub. So that's at org. Yeah. So it's EIH@eib.org. Apologies for that. And please do reach to us, because we would like to help you to get to the right financing solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Luana, as being the host of today here, your 30 seconds takeaway for the audience for the rest of the day and beyond.
Yeah, I think CIVITAS is proving itself to be, and the cities involved in CIVITAS projects, it's proving itself to be a repository of bankable solutions with a good return on investment. So don't shy away of interacting with these cities and looking at what measures they have adopted with what results. That's my first message. And then my second message is to keep an eye on the Green Deal call topic. Have a look at the next Horizon Europe plans, interact perhaps with the overall Horizon framework, and have a look at the Horizon City mission or the Horizon City partnership, because this is also something that is under discussion. So the innovation in cities will happen also a lot through Horizon to continue to test this type of innovative measures.
Thank you. This was the panel of today from the EIP-SCC Marketplace Initiative, where we're talking about sustainable urban mobility. We talked about SUMP, the capabilities that EIB can bring to the table, and 2 concrete examples from Madrid and Manchester. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to seeing you again. This was Lutz Heuser. I am the Action Cluster Lead of the Action Cluster Sustainable Urban Mobility of the EIP-SCC. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So back to Ilko Kruijsenga, one of the matchmakers of the Smart City Marketplace team. So we do have a few minutes off, and then we'll reconvene at 11:15 with some great examples of projects in Europe in the space of urban mobility and transport. So see you in a couple of